Hello all from Hong Kong. I'm out mountain biking in the steamy jungles up on the mountain trails. Riding with buffaloes and snakes and spiders and bird-winged butterflies and eagles and things. I'm making this video. In fact, this is the third time I've tried to make this video. Two things have happened in the last, while I was editing up, and so I thought I'd better do it again to include it because it vindicates what I've said. And on this channel there are 3 other videos, and I defer to those videos. One of the things I wanted to talk about was Henry Nowak. Now, I don't know any more about that case than what I've read in the media and what I've seen on TV, and indeed watching what was released of the body cam on the police officer. But what I saw made me, and I think nearly everyone else, really angry. The officer that I saw, the body cam footage when he turned up, don't think so, mate. Well, for a start, PC plod, it's sir or madam, so get down and give me 20 for a start. Secondly, all of us who were police officers, first thing we do at the scene of any incident is administer first aid. It's what we learned, was what I've learned at Hendon, it's what I learned in the Royal Hong Kong Police. We had to undertake the St John's Ambulance first aid course. And during all my time as a police officer, I used it a lot. And the first thing we do, we apply the ABC, airway, breathing, circulation. I don't know, but I think that had the officer applied pressure to the stab wounds when he first arrived, the poor Henry, that young lad, might have survived. Instead, the officer listened to a deceptive account from the murderer and formed an opinion that poor Henry was in the wrong, not the murderer. And he didn't administer first aid. Now that's all bad enough. But then I saw the cowardly police command making excuses. They had the audacity to say, oh, we would have probably died anyway. Would he? How do you know? You didn't even try. I think all those police officers should be, well, I understand there's some sort of inquiry, and I expect they're all going to lose their job. They'll all be sacrificial lambs. But it speaks to a broader problem, the two-tier policing problem, the two-tier justice problem. It's totally unfair. It's intolerable. It just cannot go on anymore. This was compounded by that friggin' DEI lunatic, David Lammy. He's the Deputy Prime Minister. I think he's the Secretary of State Security, and I think he's also the Lord Chancellor. He's a classic DEI hire. I think it was Jacob Rees-Mogg who pointed out that he let the cat out of the bag. And Lammy said, equality doesn't mean treating everyone the same. It's unbelievable. You can't make it up. That's the state of what Britain is like at the moment. I then saw the death of, and I'm sorry I don't know the gentleman's name, the attempted beheading and the eye gouging of that Northern Irish guy by the Sudanese savage. He's a savage. I stand by it. That's what savages do. That is the pure definition of savagery. What you see on the video and what everyone has seen is this Sudanese guy who shouldn't be in the United Kingdom. He's an illegal immigrant, and there's a video of him straddled across this poor dude covered in blood, savagely attacking him. And why are we allowing it to happen? What is worse than all of this is the cover-up by the establishment, by this Labour government particularly. I mean, it's a tyranny, it's an authoritarian, evil dictatorship, really. Starmer is evil by any definition. Lammy is just an idiot. He's just a useful idiot. But Starmer is truly evil, and he's surrounded by mostly a cabinet of evil people. And their cover-up, which permeated through the whole of society by the judiciary, who should be ashamed of themselves, that, you know, they're sitting under Dieu et mon droit, sitting underneath it. You should be ashamed of yourself. And then the establishment, then the civil service, and then you have the police. As I said in the video about the declining standards of police generally, but particularly the UK police, the police has been accused of institutional racism for so long, they've been bashed by so many people, that gradually the structure of the police has changed. And now it is infiltrated by the DEI woke mind virus. So all the bosses, all the senior command, all the courses are focused on DEI. And so what that means is that the frontline officers, it's easier for them to arrest a white man for whatever it is, thought crimes, and they're putting these people in jail just for saying stuff. And yet they're doing nothing about the absolute violence that we all know about. There is only one way to change things, and it's not violence, even though you get angry. Now, I'm prone to getting angry, and when I'm angry, I don't behave rationally. Don't write anything down on social media. Don't say anything that could be construed as inciting whatever, some form of, being abusive or, the broad term of offense. Unfortunately, this term racism, at one end, rounding up Jews, torturing them, and then gassing them to death en masse. And at the other end is just disagreeing with someone who's a different race to you. Where is the line? You could call someone racist all the way along that spectrum. And that's what the problem is. It's so easy to accuse someone of racism without being specific about what you're actually doing. It's so easy to say, I'm offended. Well, be offended. As John Cleese used to say, everyone has a right to be offended and to offend. Sticks and stones. This is just ridiculous what's going on at the moment. And what it's doing is it's absolutely destroying society. No one is happy. When we come to England, it's a death spiral, isn't it? But the first point I make is don't get involved in those protests. Don't get involved in any of the violence and the stuff what we saw in the wake of Southport, in the wake of Southampton, the Southampton riots, and also in Belfast. It does no good. You play into the hands of the government because, like here in Hong Kong, when there were the riots in maybe, 7, 8 years ago, I know the way the police behave. They'll just record everything. Record all the evidence on the video cameras. It's all in, there's all the surveillance, there's all the informants, there's all the other sources, there's all the online information which you can get hold of. I mean, I make a living. I can watch what you're doing using the camera on your computer. Heaven knows what the security service and the police have nowadays. They can see everything you're doing. And what happened here is they gathered all the evidence and then they picked off all the suspects and then threw them in the jail, which is on this island. Here in Hong Kong, I thought they were fairly lenient. They're more lenient than in the UK. But here in Hong Kong, they were consistent. And the ones they put in jail were arsonists and traitors. They committed criminal damage, they assaulted people and that sort of thing. In the UK, it's a different thing. There is a two-tier system. There's a guy been given a jail sentence for 2 years at those Southampton riots for chucking rocks. Okay, you shouldn't chuck rocks. But at the same time, those Muslims kicked 10 bales of shit out of those police officers at Manchester Airport. They got off scot-free. It's two-tier justice. It cannot go on. So if you can't, get angry, what can you do? It's simple. We live in a democracy. That's all we have. As flawed as democracy is, that's all we have. The only way you can make change is to find a candidate that represents what you want for your future, the future of your children and your grandchildren. That's all you can do. If you look at the options, you've got the Tories. They had about, 14 years. What was it? May, Sunak, that idiot Boris Johnson. A lot of the harm that the UK is experiencing now is because of the Tories. And they're the ones that are trying to, force this multiculturalism, which is a failed experiment. Multiculturalism doesn't work. Community is about monoculture. A community is an extended family where you share the same history, values, culture, and all that, ethics and all that kind of thing. That you share something in common and you work together and you collaborate as a community. If you have lots of different communities, just like you have in the UK, it creates conflict and stress. You see in the UK now, they all hate each other. I'm now in my 60s. I don't know whether you can call me a Gen X or a boomer. I'm on the cusp of it. I was brought up in the 60s and 70s, worked in the 80s and 90s, so the 20th century. It wasn't perfect. But the one thing we did have was hope and optimism. We knew that if we worked hard at school, at university, or learned something in a trade, became an apprentice, or whatever we did, we had a very good chance of having a nice life. And how you define nice life, maybe it's having a family, having enough money to put a deposit down on a house and work your way up the ladder, having a job you like, doing things you like, engaging in the hobbies you like, walking the streets without fear of being attacked, walking the streets with a smile on your face. That's what we had then. And then now in the 21st century, I think what is missing, you know, we have all these extra things like mobile phones and internet and all this stuff, and you can fly fairly cheaply around the world. But what people don't have is hope, and they don't have optimism. I mean, my older kids, you know, they've always got their hand outstretched to me, who they hate, by the way, because they think I'm a capitalist. But they want the money from me because they can't make enough money themselves. The cost of living is so high, they can't afford nice things. They definitely can't afford to put a deposit down on a house. They've lost hope. And because they've lost hope, they are in a sort of, I suppose the word is anomie. There's a social commentator called Frank Wright I've come across, who articulates it really well. So I defer to him. And you know, I subscribe to his Substack now, and it's pretty good. I don't agree with all the Catholicism stuff, even though I used to be, well, I was raised as a Catholic. I do believe in a God, maybe not the same as the way he believes it. And then there are lots of other people who speak a lot of sense. There's a friend of mine who has a nom de plume called Walter de Havilland. His Substack is excellent as well. He just writes about what's going on in the world, and he's very well observed. There must be hundreds, if not millions, of people like this. And I think they are the sort of people who should become candidates for Restore, because Restore is our only option. So anyway, Tories, you can't go back to them. They let everyone down. They aren't conservative. The Labour Party, socialists. Socialists love war. That's all they do. Pol Pot, Mao, Stalin, Hitler is a National Socialist. They love war, because what war does is it creates an enemy to take the focus off the tyranny at home. It's very well articulated by George Orwell in his book 1984. You've got to have this constant war going on to distract the proletariat from the tyranny and authoritarian and surveillance state at home. So they've always got these wars, and they'll spend your money on missiles and rockets and stuff. You know, in the recent war in Iran, I think the Yanks had spent about $2 million on THAAD missiles to take about $10,000 worth of drones out of the sky. Same with Ukraine and Russia. What's it to do with us? And in fact, if you keep sending money to the naturally losing side would be Ukraine, right? I'm not going to get into who can lay claim to the Rus areas and the Crimea and so forth. But it's not our problem, and we shouldn't be supporting it. It's coming out of your tax money. But it's also perpetuating the death of young men. And that's what I agree with Frank Wright. We can't keep continuing and supporting these wars. Israel and Palestine, I don't give a flying fuck about either of them. Russia and Ukraine, two former Soviet Union countries, I don't care about them either. What's going on elsewhere, I don't care. It's not our war. We shouldn't be funding them. We shouldn't be sending rockets. Iran, what was that about? What was the excuse for invading it, or bombing it, I should say? I don't think they invaded it. I don't know, it's a sort of stalemate, isn't it? It was because they said, oh, well, they're developing nuclear weapons. Well, other ways of dealing with that. The same way of dealing with Korea. Have they bombed North Korea? No. I agree entirely with what Frank Wright says. You've got to stop the wars. And the socialists, Barack Obama, all those guys, they're the ones who do it. They're the ones who took out Mubarak, Gaddafi, Saddam. Okay, these are not nice guys, but they kept the Middle East in check because they're dictators. And those sort of countries, which I've been to all of those countries, they're basically shitholes. And the people are volatile, and they need a strong leader to keep, and they're tribal, and you need a strong leader to keep it together. Once you got rid of all those despot leaders, the whole of that region is volatile. And we have the problems we have today. I'm vehemently against all these wars and funding them. Apart from that, there's a whole bunch of other things why socialism doesn't work. It's never going to work. It's unfair. You can't mess with meritocracy. Meritocracy is the best, is the natural order for humans. Lib Dems, don't know anything about them. They just look like, you know, grannies at a knitting circle. The Greens, well, they're just hippies, aren't they? Ideological hippies who go on about climate change and this, that, and the other. It's all absolute nonsense. But of course, they're being propped up by the jihadis who are getting into power on their coattails. So now in the UK, you think how many mayors, how many local government leaders, how many councillors, and they're taking over Parliament. And if the Greens get the votes, that's just shoehorning in the jihadis, and they have a settled intention of a Islamic caliphate across Europe. They've already got Spain mostly. There are parts of Italy which are awful, which are third world now, third world Islamic slums. If their countries were so great and their ideology and way of life so great, why don't they stay where they are? Why take their troubles and implant them into British cities, which is what's happening? That's why we have the savagery. You've transplanted the savagery from the third world and plonked it in frigging Birmingham. Ironically, and I talked to one of my other videos about liberal white women, they're the ones who are supporting these Islamists. Now, I think when I say this liberal white women, you know who I mean. You know who I mean. They're sort of tattooed up, ugly, got loads of piercings and stuff. Never have kids because they hate white kids. Oh, they'll adopt an ethnic kid so that they don't have to have a white kid. But if they do have a white kid, they'll mutilate it. If they're a boy, they'll turn it into a girl. If it's a girl, they'll turn it into a boy by chopping off their bits. They're evil. They're not right. They're, as I said in that video, they're people who are conflicted. They got a mental illness. They suffer from the woke mind virus. They hate themselves and they hate everybody else. And they want everyone else to be as miserable as them, and particularly their children. So they're one of the groups that form the Green Party, or that kind of thing. There's Democrats in the States. There's something wrong with these people. You know there's something wrong with them. But the problem with the Green Party, you can laugh at them because they are sort of like Teletubby-esque. You know, they don't look like serious people. But what they're doing is they're opening the door to Islam and open borders and all that sort of stuff. You know, who are the ones who are going to suffer if there's an Islamic caliphate in Europe and Britain? There'll be all the liberal white women. There'll be all the homosexual, all those transgender people. They'll be the first at the gallows or thrown off buildings, followed by the Shih Tzu dog. So who's the other party? It's Reform. Now, in the beginning, I was sort of pro-Reform. When Rupert Lowe was in it, I was pro-Reform, and then suddenly they got rid of Rupert Lowe, and I thought, that's a bit strange. Then they fabricated evidence against him, said that Rupert threatened that Pakistani guy, Zia. Really? I mean, Rupert Lowe's 67, Zia's about late 30s. I mean, come on. Come on. Reform, basically, I think, evolved out of the Brexit Party. I was out here, I didn't get a chance to vote for Brexit. Had I voted, my heart would have been for independence of Britain and to regain our sovereignty. On the other side, my head would say, hang on, if I vote Brexit, I'm not going to be able to spend my hard-earned cash on a nice villa in Sicily or Tuscany, am I? It's going to make my holiday in Europe a little bit difficult. I might have to apply for a visa. Is it going to affect my stocks and shares? Is it going to affect trade? In the end, I think the 52% of British people voted for Brexit. I think the main reason they did it is because they want to close their borders to this invasion of illegal immigrants. What has happened? All it's done is stopped you getting your Polish plumbers and sparkies and chippies and tradesmen, and all that's left in is your Sudanese and Somali nutcases, thieves, crooks, pirates, and whatnot. So I think Brexit was never delivered. But anyway, I think the Reform Party sort of formed out of the Brexit Party. It's better than the other ones, but it's really Tory 2.0. It's part of the Uniparty, really, isn't it? And then taking on Jenrick and those other Tories, failed Tories. They say insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Even though the Reform Party have a little bit of traction now, and I do understand the risks of splitting the vote of the sensible people, but my heart and my mind is with Restore. I agree entirely with the manifesto. And the point I make at the end of the whole of this video is, if you are unhappy with the way things are in the United Kingdom, and if I'm being honest, it doesn't really affect me. I live in this beautiful place here. The only thing is that Possibly because I speak my mind, the thought police would drag me off and incarcerate me for the rest of my living days. And, you know, I used to like going back to the UK. I used to have, well, living, you know, I don't have many, my parents have passed away, but I've still got brothers and sisters and friends in the UK. I used to like hiking the Offers Dyke and Coast to Coast and the Pennine Way and the South Down Way. I used to like motorcycling, going to the adventure bike gathering and all those sort of, you know, going to English pubs and having a pint of beer and all that kind of stuff. But the risk is too high and I just can't go there, and I have options. So, but for you, if you happen to be British and you've had enough, I think your only option is to vote Restore. I think you've got to give it a go. It is the only option to get out of this death spiral. And it is a death spiral. There's no hope. It's got to be a fairer society. You can't have this two-tier justice. Can't have these savages just coming over and over on boats or coming through the back door, not doing anything, and all your tax money going to support a dying country, a country of foreigners that doesn't share your values. So you have this horrible sense of not belonging. I suppose the analogy is, if you have a house or an apartment, would you leave your door open and allow a stranger to come in and sit on your settee, go to your fridge, empty all the food out of it, go on the settee, get the remote control, change over from Strictly Come Dancing or Formula One or Premier League football or whatever you like watching on the television, and watch people walking round and round a big cube in Saudi Arabia, chanting and wailing. And then going upstairs and raping your daughter over and over and over again. And then if you say something and say, well, I don't think this is fair, you get put in jail. That's the analogy. That's the analogy. That's the life you live in the UK, and you don't know it. I know it because I lived for the large part of my life in the last century. And it was, you know, despite everything else, it was nice. We lived a nice life. And this century, the youngsters don't know any better. They say, oh, you old fart, you're a gammon, you're this, you're a racist, you're far right, you're this, that, and the other. And they try and escape from this enemy, this horrible life, by taking drugs to go to another reality, and then scrolling on their smartphones and tablets. You just see them. They're like zombies. The people nowadays, to me, I grew up without mobile phones or the internet. I look around, everyone's like this, like a zombie, escaped in some alternative dopamine addictive world. It's crazy. Can't you see how mad it is? And can't you see there's a better world? Now, there are people who escape from it. And they've emigrated and they've gone to other parts of the world. You know, do things like I do. I've got all my hobbies, my mountain biking, my paragliding. I motorbike all around the world. I've seen the whole world. I've had a brilliant career. I'm near the end of it. It makes no odds really to me. It's just I feel a kind of duty to say, look, the emperor's not wearing any clothes. Look, can you see? It's mad. It's terrible. Why aren't you doing something about it? If you're happy with it, okay, I'm wrong. Carry on doing what you're doing. If you're not happy, put a tick against Restore in the next election, whenever it is. Force the election. Do not fall into the hands of the government by engaging in violence. Don't write anything, because I don't know what the laws are or what you can say. You know, it seems that you just can't disagree with anybody. You can't have an opinion. You just might as well just have that, you know, that horror movie thing where you have your mouth disappears and you just like this all day long. I don't know what you can say. But you should be able to say it. That's part of being free, isn't it? It's part of democracy. It's part of a free society. You should be able to say things. You're not going to be, it shouldn't be, you know, Gulag Archipelago-ish, should it? Which is what it's become in the UK. It is like that. You should read that book. It's horrible. And read the George Orwell books as well. That'll give you an insight. I think there is hope if you get into power the right people. Now, the challenge for Restore is getting enough candidates, like-minded candidates. But what I've seen from the manifesto, it makes complete sense. Japan's doing it. Japan has a new prime minister, and they've decided, hang on, this isn't good. We're going to change things. I don't know what can be done with the EU. Germany and France are finished. Have you been, you know, no one goes, who goes to on holiday to Paris, a romantic holiday in Paris anymore? it's a shithole, isn't it? You know, like, you've won, you know, a holiday for 2 in Birmingham. Hooray! I mean, we had a house in Bournemouth, and when we first got it, we thought it'd be quite nice. And, you know, a sort of retirement seaside place with a pier and, you know, and it turned into an absolute shithole with drug addicts in the lobby. The Tesco's Extra around the corner was just shoplifting, you know, central. There was, our place got sublet by the Muslim Brotherhood, who were trading in girls, you know, the rape gangs, cocaine, won't have a pint, love a snort, and everything else. And then, okay, they got kicked out and we sold the place, and I went, won't do that again. But how many other people are in that position, living in those? When I was doing the coast to coast, I was in Yorkshire, and I was camping in a place called, what was it called? Anyway, I've forgotten. In the Yorkshire Dales, beautiful place. Next to me was a Yorkshire guy with his young lad, and we sit by the river and we got chatting, and he told me the horrible story about how his whole extended family and his whole community were forced out from where the Yorkshire town they lived in because of an Islamic sort of invasion, and they harassed his wife and broke his windows and made life miserable until they all moved out. And do you hear about this stuff? It's terrible. Anyway, I rambled on a bit then. No violence. Put your tick in the box, and I suggest you vote for Restore. I think they're the only option. They're the only way out of this mess. Anyway, 再见.